Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a classic tale full of dramatic twists, exploring what happens when the absolute smallest characters decide to take on the biggest challenges. We're going to be unpacking a really fascinating narrative from the animated fairy tale The Lion, the Mouse, and the Sleepy Bear. We're going to walk through this story step by step, because honestly, it's a total masterclass on problem solving, the irony of scale, and the wildly unexpected value of the little guy.
So what happens when the smallest animal in the forest has to solve the biggest problem? Let's just hook right into the core conflict here. Imagine being faced with a massive, literally immovable obstacle. In any ecosystem, or really any organization for that matter, we kind of just assume that big problems require big solutions, or at the very least big individuals to solve them. But as we're about to see, that assumption is going to get turned completely upside down. Okay, let's set the scene and establish the extreme size contrast between our two characters, a tiny, sleepless little mouse versus a massive, loudly snoring big bear. In one corner, you've got our protagonist, this incredibly exhausted, tiny little mouse. He lives in a lush forest, but he has a major problem. He hasn't been able to sleep all winter. And why? Because in the other corner is a huge, loudly snoring bear living in a neighboring cave. The bear hibernated months ago, but his snoring is so thunderous that it is entirely ruining the mouse's life. It is the ultimate mismatch, right? A tiny creature just looking for some peace and quiet, and a giant creature unknowingly causing absolute chaos.
Now, you gotta give the mouse some credit. He doesn't just sit around and complain. He actually takes action. He tries everything to stop the snoring. First, he goes for a diplomatic, verbal approach. He walks right up to this massive sleeping animal and shouts that summer has come. He yells, "Mr. Bear, hey, summer is here, you can wake up anytime now." But nothing. The bear is completely unresponsive. So the mouse escalates things. He actually comes back and blows vigorously into a bugle right at the bear. But shockingly, no way. The huge bear remains completely asleep. The conventional, direct methods? Yeah, they have entirely failed.
And this kicks off a brilliantly exhausting journey for our little guy. In the morning, after these failed attempts, he's just wandering sleeplessly in the forest, looking incredibly sad. By the afternoon, he ends up meeting some animal friends who ask him, "Hey, what's wrong?" He vents all his frustrations about not catching a wink of sleep all winter. And then, later, he gets a terrifying piece of advice. They tell him to go seek out the lion. Now, the mouse is understandably terrified. I mean, why the lion? Well, as his friends point out, the lion roars so loudly that everyone jumps up the instant they hear his voice. It's a really frightening suggestion, asking the roaring king of the forest for help, but pure desperation pushes the mouse forward.
Meeting the king. This is a pivotal moment. The terrifying prospect becomes real as the tiny mouse slowly approaches the sleeping lion's cave. And he is so terrified by the sheer sight of this mighty beast that he actually changes his mind. He decides to give up and just go home. But in a classic twist of fate, as he turns back, he accidentally steps on a branch. Snap! The big cat wakes up, and a tiny, trembling voice reaches the lion's ears, apologizing and timidly asking for help.
So here's where we hit a wall. The mouse respectfully explains his problem, pleading that while he's too small and his voice is too quiet to wake the bear, just one mighty roar from the lion could fix everything. But the lion is entirely caught up in his status as king of the forest. He completely dismisses him. He says, quote, "You're not even big enough to be considered snack size. I don't have time to spend for a tiny little useless mouse like you." He completely brushes off the request simply because the mouse is too small to be deemed important.
But oh man, the story immediately punishes this arrogance, the great itch. Soon after the mighty lion walks away, leaving our mouse totally dejected, there's a sudden twist of fate. The lion sneaks off to a corner where he thinks no one can see him, leans against a tree, and starts itching like crazy. He is suddenly consumed by this unbearable, maddening itch, and because he's the proud king of the forest, he's actually trying to hide it, terrified that anyone might see him looking so vulnerable.
Now you have to appreciate the incredible irony here. The huge, fearsome king of the forest versus a bunch of microscopic, jumping fleas. Just moments ago, the lion dismissed the mouse based entirely on size, but now, the massive, terrifying king of the forest is being brought to his knees by tiny little fleas hidden deep in his thick, scruffy fur. Creatures that are even smaller than the useless mouse are completely dismantling the lion's dignity. It perfectly illustrates how size is absolutely not a reliable indicator of impact.
So how can a tiny mouse save the king of the forest? Well, meanwhile, the mouse is heading home, looking super sad, when he hears this wheezing coming from the depths of the forest. He goes to investigate and finds the very embarrassed lion itching himself nonstop, looking frankly rather silly. The mouse instantly realizes what's wrong. He uses his tiny eyes to spot the tiny fleas that the big lion couldn't even see. He bravely offers his assistance, but even in pain, the lion initially balks. He says, "How can you help me? You're just a little mouse. Leave me alone." But ignoring the rude comments, the mouse jumps right onto the lion to help anyway, setting up our climax.
And this is where the comedy really shines, with the lion's chaotic flea fixes. While the mouse is crawling through the thick fur, diligently throwing out fleas, the lion completely panics, putting our tiny hero in massive danger. Step 1. The lion rubs his back left and right against a tree, almost crushing the mouse. Step 2. The desperate lion jumps quickly into a nearby lake, nearly drowning his tiny savior, who literally has to yell at him to get out. Step 3. The lion steps out and shakes himself violently dry. He shakes so hard and so fast that the poor mouse is barely able to hang on.
And yet, after all of that wild chaos, guess how many fleas are left? 0. Against all odds, surviving being nearly crushed, drowned, and shaken off, the diligent little mouse barely hangs on and successfully gets rid of every single flea. He throws out the last few remaining pests and finally cures the lion's unbearable itch. The number of fleas left to bother the king of the forest is absolute 0, and it's all thanks to the smallest creature in the woods.
This brings us to a really powerful emotional pivot. The lion feels the relief of the itch being gone, and he's just struck by a wave of deep embarrassment. Humbling himself, he tells the mouse, quote, "I looked down on you, mouse, but you still did everything in your power to save me from this difficult situation." The power dynamic has entirely shifted here. Respect was earned not by size, but by action and compassion.
A favor repaid. The narrative comes full circle now. The lion looks at the mouse and says, "Come on, hop on my back and I'll take you home." He escorts the tiny mouse all the way back to the big bear's cave. And when they get there, sure enough, they hear those loud snoring sounds just flooding out. The mouse was right. The bear is still sleeping straight through the summer. But this time, the mouse isn't alone. The lion is there, ready to use his own massive size and unique abilities for good.
The lion's solution is the exact opposite of the mouse's delicate flea removal. He takes a deep breath, he roars powerfully right into the bear's ears. And I mean a roar so loud that it literally shakes the stone floor of the cave. It is one mighty display of power, utilized perfectly to solve a problem that finesse alone couldn't fix. And just like that, the snoring finally, instantly, stops.
The result is pure comedic chaos. The big bear comes running out of the cave in hilarious confusion. He's frantically asking, quote, "What happened? Is there something wrong? Did the sun come out? Is it summer?" He has absolutely no idea what is going on. All the other forest animals gather around and just laugh at the big silly bear. And more importantly, our little hero, the mouse, rejoices because his problem is finally solved. He can finally get some sleep.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Size does not dictate your value or your ability to help others. Think about it. The lion had the sheer volume needed to wake the bear, but he lacked the precision to remove the fleas. The mouse lacked the volume to wake the bear, but possessed the exact precision needed to save the lion. No matter how small you are or how seemingly insignificant your role might appear at first glance, your specific contributions can be absolutely mighty.
I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to reflect on. Who in your life might possess a hidden roar you've been underestimating? Whether it's in your workplace, your community, or even your own family, we so often dismiss people just because they don't fit our traditional image of power or utility. But as this explainer proves, sometimes the biggest solutions come in the smallest packages. Take a hard look at how we judge strength and status in our own lives, and make sure you aren't ignoring the tiny mice who might just step up and save the day. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for those hidden roars.